All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Wanted to welcome you to CCA's Help at Home webinar, GF 101 Dining Out Strategies with our speaker, Ellen Bayens. Before we get going tonight and introducing our speaker, I just want to give you just a quick overview of the Canadian Celiac Association. I'm Melissa Secord, the Executive Director, who is unfortunately suffering from a bit of a cold that's going around. And if you're not familiar with the Canadian Celiac Association, we've been around since 1972. Initially started as a support group, and we are your voice for people who are adversely affected by gluten. And we are a small national charity that is a source of science-based information, and that's delivered with compassion. Some of our strategic priority areas are access to safe food, quality of life, awareness, diagnosis, and strengthening the community. Some of our services and education that we offer free of charge and available online is our Canadian Celiac online magazine, published 3 times a year. We've got another one coming up on May 1st. So please check out our website if you're looking for some great information from a wide variety of sources. Soon we'll be launching our Growing Up Celiac resource for parents. There'll be a workbook for parents, and we'll have a companion video as well. So watch for announcements on that if you're a parent of a child with celiac disease. We also do offer client and peer support service for free of charge. We've got a client support desk that is currently manned by a registered dietitian on Mondays and Thursdays from 9 to 5 Eastern Time. And I've got the phone number up there. And we also have, if you're looking for more in-depth support, we've got our peer support network, and with up to 1 hour of one-on-one support by a trained and experienced volunteer. And again, that's free of charge as a charity service that we offer. So feel free to contact actually our peer support desks through that 1-800 number you see on the screen if you're looking for more assistance. May is coming up as Celiac Awareness Month, and so if you visit our website and click on the News and Events tab, you'll see some amazing things that are happening throughout the month, including some of the iconic buildings across Canada will be lit up green for celiac. We'll be doing some Facebook Live sessions, and we've got a couple of events going on as well in Toronto. Some of you may be coming from our CCA Facebook group. We've got 11,000 enthusiastic people with celiac disease and gluten sensitivity on there. It is a volunteer moderated Facebook group, unlike a lot of groups out there. So we have CCA experienced volunteers who are able to provide support, advice, clarify myths as well. And I know that our speaker, Ellen Bayens, is a very active member of the group. Every Friday on that same group, we have CCA virtual office hours with Selena DeVries, a registered dietitian and CCA board member, and she's on there every Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern or 12 noon Pacific time. And we also have a CCA Facebook Live series that live sessions have been popping up each month, so watch out for our speakers popping up on the page where you can interact with them on kind of micro topics that we've got going. And so why donate? I hope I've covered a few of the reasons why you should donate and support the CCA as a small charity to keep up the work that we're doing, the services and the support, the advocating that we do in Ottawa, keeping your products safe and advancing the issues and Canadian research. We do require donations. So if you've enjoyed this webinar tonight, any of the services or support you provided, consider donating to the CCA, and just giving you some ways to give online or through our phone lines. So for tonight's webinar, here's just some of the ground rules and some of the overview if you're new to the webinar. Everyone is muted so everyone can enjoy the speaker. If you have a question, you're going to type it into the Q&A box that's at the bottom or top of your screen. You'll see a little Q&A. The questions are anonymous to the crowd, so no one will see your questions, so don't be shy. Just the speaker and I will see them. We may get a lot of questions, so please note we might not get to all of them, so we'll just have to watch the time. We did receive lots of questions ahead of time, so I know that Ellen has tried to incorporate those into her speaking notes. We are recording tonight, and so in case you've missed something, we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks, so watch that and you can share and relive the great event. And just be sure you tell us how we did. We'll have a survey that goes out into your inbox tomorrow. We can only improve if we get your feedback and also know the different topics that you'd like to hear. So without further ado, I'm going to unmute Ellen here, our speaker. We've got Ellen Bayens joining us. And Ellen is the founder and president of the Celiac Scene, the go-to gluten-free resource for Victoria, Vancouver Island, and the Gulf Islands in BC. Referred to as the remarkable celiac by our CCA, Ellen speaks firsthand and with infectious humor and lots of energy about the challenges of the diet and how they can become the gateway to good health. She's a past president of the Victoria chapter of the CCA, and she's a British Columbia gluten-free ambassador, and she's been featured in several publications such as Gluten-free Living, Allergic Living, Delight Gluten-free magazine, and our own Canadian Celiac magazine. Ellen is a frequent commentator on TV, radio, and print ads. And as I said, she's a great supporter of our Facebook group. And she's just an awesome, enthusiastic, gluten-free living with restaurants, retailers, and industry stakeholders to get gluten-free right. So I now introduce Ellen.
Hello, everyone. Hello to all of my gluten-free friends who are listening. I love you. I know many of you, and you're all friends I haven't met yet. It's great to be a part of the CCA, and I hope that what I share with you will make you feel more comfortable with dining out. It is what I call one of the frontiers of being gluten-free. Once we're diagnosed, it's a challenge learning how to cook for ourselves at home in the context of our potentially gluten families is quite an exercise. And then wanting to venture out into the real world, socialize with friends, enjoy a restaurant meal, that can be quite intimidating. But I know that through my own experience that we can learn to ask the right questions and work with the restaurant so that we can feel that we're safe and we're going to have a delicious meal. So the topic of this presentation is Dining Out Gluten-Free Celiac 101. And I hope you'll find it helpful. Okay. Thank you. So Melissa's going to move through the slides, and so you'll hear me saying next every once in a while. The most important ingredient of a gluten-free meal is communication. It's a collaboration between you, the server, the chef, the person who owns a restaurant, to work together to create a meal that is safe. And we have to understand that they are in a kitchen that is fast moving. There's a lot of gluten on the surfaces, in the air, and they're doing their best to accommodate us. And some of them do it better than others. And learning how to ask those questions in a diplomatic way so that they're not intimidated, offended, helps you to know whether this is a restaurant that can meet your needs. Next. Here I'm just underlining what I just said. And I can say that the very best situation, the ideal situation, is if you know you're going to be dining at a restaurant, is to drop in person during downtimes to say, what can you serve me as a celiac? I'm a celiac, I need or I'm very sensitive and I need a meal that's gluten-free. If you can meet them face to face, it's easier for them, they can make the plans. Calling ahead is great, but there are times when we are just thrown into a restaurant and we have to do our best to decide what we can eat, and they have to also decide what they are prepared to serve you to keep you safe. Next. So where to begin? This presentation offers a very comprehensive list of questions that you can ask. You don't need to ask them all. I have found in the 16 years of since my diagnosis, you can pretty well tell how the restaurant is responding to you. I find that the restaurants who have really done their homework, they are so happy to be asked, what can you serve me? But if you get the sense that they're a little bit annoyed with the depth of your questions, that's also that's indicative of how safe your meal may be. And that's the starting the questions. It only takes 1, 2, or 3, and you'll get the sense of whether they're on board with serving you. Next. So the good news is, since I was diagnosed in 2003, more and more restaurants are able to offer us gluten-free menus, or they offer you a menu with notations on it. That's been a breakthrough. When I was starting out, 2003, they didn't know what gluten was at all. Lots of restaurants have really researched what the ingredients, set up a protocol, and they're only too happy to tell us what they're proud and happy to tell us what they've invested in. And again, if you're met with impatience or exasperation, think about what's going on in your dynamic. Sometimes I'm sure some of you have had this response from a waiter or a chef or restaurant, that if you're that sensitive, they really can't meet your needs. And I find that a little bit troubling, because if they create a menu that says gluten-free, if they identify gluten-free items on the menu, they are throwing their hat in the ring, saying, we're able to serve you. But when we begin, so that's what prompts us to ask, well, what can you serve us? How are you going to take care of our needs? And if they back up from that, I get a little nervous. And finally, when restaurants get gluten-free, offer you a great gluten-free meal, be sure to reward them generously, because it takes time for them to set up a meal that for us that's safer, and there's a lot of questions. We're not the streamlined diner. They are going to make extra arrangements for us, and be sure to reward them generously. Another point is also be diplomatic. You're an ambassador for the next gluten-free diner who is going to be at that restaurant. And if you've given them a good experience and you've rewarded them generously, they're going to be open to the next gluten-free diner who asks those questions. Next. So the first question I ask is, can you tell me about the meals you recommend to diners who need to eat gluten-free? I am meeting them where they're at. I want them to serve me something that they're absolutely comfortable serving, that they've got a track record, that it's safe, that it tastes delicious, that they haven't had any feedback that the meal didn't meet the needs of the diner, and that the staff is comfortable preparing that meal. I don't expect when I go to a gluten-free restaurant that they're going to make me a gluten-free apple pie because I want it for dessert. I want to work with them, see what they recommend, and at that point, often that's when they'll pull up the gluten-free menu, or they'll say, these are the notations, you can trust in those, what would you like? You're basically creating the handshake or opening up the communication to say, I'm ready to listen to you, and I hope you're ready to listen to me. Next. So then you start to talk about the order, and this gets a little more in depth, and this is why I like to talk about these things ahead of time if I can, or when I enter the restaurant, everyone else is having a drink or chatting at the table, and I'll go over to the server or the chef and say, when I place my order, how do I know if it's really gluten-free, the ingredients? So and as you dive down into these questions, you'll start to see. So how do you know if your ingredients are really gluten-free? Does it say on the label? Did you check the product website? Did you call the supplier, the manufacturer? Or did you check with the Celiac Scene, which is the local entity, or the CCA? Where did you go to find out to know that it's gluten-free? Typically, when one question I ask is, oh, we serve gluten-free bread. I want to know, Where was that? What's the brand name of that bread? Is it a brand that we recognize? Knick, O'Dough's, Promise, all of the ones that are our favorites? Or is it a bread that was made at a bakery that also bakes with gluten? You have to be careful about that. That's very difficult to create a truly gluten-free bread in the context of a gluten bakery. As a side note, if I do learn of that, I'll track down the bakery and I'll say, do you test your products post-production to know that what you're doing actually produces bread that contains less than 20 parts per million? So I'm very skeptical, I have to say, about gluten bakeries that often offer gluten-free. So I want to know the restaurant where they're sourcing their gluten-free bread. Will there be pure spices used in my meal? Do you have seasonings? Is it a house seasoning or a corporate seasoning? Is it celiac safe? Soy sauce, we all know that's one to watch for, often made with wheat. Is it a gluten-free soy sauce? Is it a shared deep fryer? That's a real problem, and the CCA has stepped forward to say that a shared deep fryer can indeed cross-contaminate gluten-free items and people can become ill. So I've heard this many times from chefs that say it's deep fried, so that gets rid of the gluten-free. I'm afraid that is not the case. How are sauces and dressings thickened? Do they use a cornstarch? Do they use a flour? This tells the server or the chef that you are actually wanting to know more about how their meals are prepared. And if they are happy to share it with you, that's great. But if they start to back up a bit, you have to be careful. Next. So how are gluten-free orders prepared in relation to the regular flow of the kitchen? Do they have a separate area? Do they clean the area? Do they do it on parchment paper? So you want to know what's the dividing line? Where's the barrier between the craziness of the gluten regular orders and your order that is supposed to be prepared without any contact? Question I asked a pizza place that suddenly began offering gluten-free pizza. Does the staff wash their hands between preparing my order and others? Do they change gloves? Do they change their aprons? When I asked it at a pizza place, the woman answering my questions had an apron completely covered in wheat flour. Do they clean the surfaces before preparing my order? Cleaning is different than sanitizing. Cleaning means that you're removing the gluten. Sanitizing means that you're killing the bacteria. So those are two different things. I want to know that the surface has been cleaned of gluten. How do staff ensure all utensils used in preparing my food are free from any trace of gluten? So again, is it run through a dishwasher at top speed and sterilized at an antibacterial level, or are particles of wheat and gluten actually removed from the utensils and the plates, the baking dishes, all of that? Again, you don't have to ask all of these questions, but these are the questions that I have learned to ask in the years since my diagnosis. Okay, next. So another tricky topic that's come up recently is a restaurant that they do a great job of a gluten-free bun. They grill the burger, but when they reach into the tomatoes, the cheese, with their gloved hands, are those the same bins that they reach into when they dress gluten orders? I saw this at a sandwich place, and they reach in and out of the same bins, and they would top the gluten items, and sometimes they'd even throw back the cheese, or there's too much of a deli meat into that same bin. That bin has been cross-contaminated. So I want to know, will you be going into your fresh bins to get a fresh tomato, fresh cheese, fresh items to put on my order? This is a tough one. A lot of restaurants really don't want to go to that distance, and I know it's difficult, and we have to be diplomatic in asking that, but that can be a potential point of cross-contamination. Do they use a separate or scrubbed frying pan? That's great to know. Is that a lot of them use a griddle, and I'm not sure about the science of the griddle, but they say we scrub it all the time. It's hot, they throw water on it, everything bubbles off, they scrape it. So I'm not a fan of that, but I've had food like that and seem to be okay. Do they use aluminum foil on the griddle? Do they use dedicated pots to boil the pasta? A restaurant in town used the same pot for their pastas. That's not good enough. They once even admitted that they use the same water to boil gluten-free pasta and regular pasta. So this is a tragedy. And colanders, the gluten can be plugged in the little holes, and then when your gluten-free pasta is run through that, it can be cross-contaminated. So just as you learn the points of cross-contamination in your own kitchen, we are asking restaurants who promise us a gluten-free meal to also follow those same standards. Next. Even how do they communicate with a kitchen that a gluten-free order has been placed? A lot of places now have an online system where they've got allergy or celiac. They have a way of identifying it so that everyone is on board. This is a gluten-free meal. The protocol kicks in and they are protected. We had an incident here where a restaurant hadn't had that protocol and subsequently did institute it because they had 4 people, 2 gluten-free, 2 with gluten, ordered almost the same meal, and they were cross-referenced. So the gluten-free people got the gluten pasta and vice versa. The 2 celiacs said this was the best pasta they'd ever had, but they were promptly ill. So, you know, you've got to have a system of ordering it properly and delivering it to the table properly. Next. And this is what I was alluding to. So how does the server let the kitchen know that this is an order that has to be prepared gluten-free? And then how will my server let me know that the order they're giving me is gluten-free? You can already tell how assertive I am, but I will ask the server, is this a gluten-free meal? I need it to be gluten-free. I'm a celiac. So it's very clear, the chain of safety. But some restaurants have that all done sort of implicitly. They have, I can mention Boston Pizza, their gluten-free pizza is square. The Riz I've seen in Toronto, I believe it is, has a plate that says gluten-free on it. Another, Red Robin, if I can drop some names, they have a purple toothpick, and when you receive that with the purple toothpick, you know that it's gone through the allergy protocol. So it lets everyone know who's in contact with your meal that this is a gluten-free meal. It's very assuring. Sometimes once I had a burger with a bun that looked so good, I couldn't believe it was gluten-free. So I had the server go back and check the actual brand name of that bun before I dared to eat it. So this is what I do. Aren't I wonderful? Next. So, and I think it's helpful to know why a restaurant is serving the gluten-free. What prompted them to do that? And it's a bit of an open-ended question, but the stories that I've received are just so moving. There's a restaurant in Victoria that it's a pizza place, and the owner, I'm just looking towards my notes, the owner's son was diagnosed as a celiac, and he was determined to create a pizza that was absolutely delicious and safe for his son. Subsequently, the owner was diagnosed with celiac disease. So he is so careful. It's a gluten and a gluten-free pizza restaurant, but he is so careful in how he sources the ingredients, his cross-contamination procedures. So knowing that gives me so much confidence in that restaurant. How did the restaurant learn to meet the needs of the gluten-free diners? It's very trendy. Who did they go to learn? I've given talks to restaurants, to manufacturers. I'm there to help them, but where did they get their information? From volunteers with the local chapter of the CCA, the CCA's restaurant certification program, a registered dietitian, the Celiac Scene? How did they learn what they were doing? and if they're doing it right. And ultimately, it's always helpful to, if there's a staff member who has celiac disease, who can advocate in the kitchen and also assure diners in the dining room that what they're ordering is safe. We're taking over the world. Next. So this is really a challenge. Pizza restaurants are problematic. If a restaurant prepares its own gluten crusts, the risk of cross-contact to ingredients, equipment, surfaces with airborne gluten is extremely high. You can see it's hanging in the air. I've worked with so many, a few incidents. A gluten bakery wanted to go gluten-free. So they looked through their whole system, they cleaned it up, they found gluten in the vents, in the cracks of the equipment. It absolutely settles everywhere for hours and hours. Even if the restaurant is clean, it'll settle on the counters, it'll settle on their stack of aprons, it'll settle on the pizza pans. It is a hazardous zone. So partake of a pizza restaurant only if they have strict protocols in place to protect our safety. These are the real tough questions. Next. So, crusts. Do they make a gluten-free crust on site? If yes, when do they do that? When there are gluten pizzas being made? Do they do it on a Sunday when the restaurant is closed? Do they do it side by side? So is there a separation of time, and is there a separation of place? So in a different part of the restaurant. Are the ingredients they use gluten-free? Are they buying the gluten-free flours from a bulk bin? Do those flours and ingredients arrive with some kind of gluten-free affirmation? Are they baked on dedicated pans? Are they baked on the pans that are used for gluten? Are they baked at the same time, in and out? Do they use the same, I guess it's a sort of a ladle to pull the pizzas in and out of the oven? Frankly, it's a nightmare. And let's go to the next screen. So if they ask more crusty questions, do they purchase the gluten-free crust? This is assuring to me. So perhaps they admit that they cannot create it. They purchase it from a manufacturer supplier. There are many of them. So I want to know, though, what is the brand name of that crust? There are many brands that are dedicated gluten-free, and they're supplying restaurants. Or if it's local, is it a gluten-free bakery, or is it a bakery that bakes with gluten and gluten-free? I want to know who made that crust that I'll be eating. And when that crust arrives, is it wrapped? Is it in a single serving so that it won't be cross-contaminated as it arrives or gets opened up? Some manufacturers also have their own pans. It's a kind of they call it a make and bake or make and take. So everything is done within that pizza pan to even prevent any further cross-contamination or potential cross-contamination. Next. This is my nightmare. So the visual is one thing. The questions are, how are gluten-free sauces and toppings prepared? How do you know that they've vetted the pepperoni, the ham? Are they gluten-free? Are they from gluten-free manufacturers? Do they arrive with a gluten-free label? The sauces, how do they make it up? Do they thicken it with flour? When do they make those ingredients? While the flour is in the air, or down times when the sous chef comes in, or separate days? And then you can ask all of the ingredient questions that, in more detail. I'm telling you, the pizza restaurants don't like these questions. Next. And this alludes to the picture. Is there a dedicated gluten-free prep area? The restaurateur whose son was a celiac and he subsequently was diagnosed, he has a prep area that is far removed from the regular area. If not, how will they prevent cross-contamination as they prepare my pizza? The pizza business is fast and furious. How are they going to make sure that the person who's making our pizza has washed their hands, changed their apron, has cleared an area, that the prep will be completely gluten-free. And then it gets really tricky. Will the kitchen use the same sauce and ladle to drag across my gluten-free pizza as they use for gluten pizzas? You will be horrified to know that most of them do. So that sauce and that ladle has got gluten on it, and it's dragged across our gluten-free pizzas. Then the same frontier. Will the kitchen, even with clean gloved hands, dip into the cheese bin that they also dipped in when they were dressing the gluten pizzas? This is the degree that we have to ask those questions. So as a result, the huge chains, unless they do an exceptional local job, will offer you a gluten-free crust, but they cannot guarantee that they offer you a gluten-free pizza. So, and the wording in their advertising is very careful. They'll say order a gluten-free crust, but a gluten-free crust does not make for a gluten-free pizza. Next. So, it's a lot of questions, and for the newly diagnosed, it's very overwhelming to ask those questions. In a way, when you're diagnosed with celiac disease, you grow a backbone. You have to start asking these questions, otherwise you will be ill. And we want to dine out. We want to be with our friends and our family and go in social situations and enjoy a great meal. So how can you assure that, apart from asking these questions, if you're not yet comfortable? Contact your local chapter of the CCA. They are just like us, and they know their local community, and they know the restaurants that they can trust. And ask for their list, or go on their website, look at what or who they recommend. The CCA's got this gluten-free food program rolling. They're certifying restaurants. They're going to be asking these same questions, making sure that they come up with answers that legitimize what they're doing. And if you're in Victoria, Vancouver Island, check the Celiac Scene, because we are a community of celiacs who have created a resource that lists the restaurants that we trust. On any given day, yesterday I had 2 reports of restaurants that were not up to standard. I reach out to that restaurant, work with the owner or the chef to say, what can we do? Something went wrong. Let's work together. So it's a dynamic community. It potentially is unique in North America. But when you come to Victoria, or if you're lucky enough to be diagnosed in Victoria, Vancouver Island, the Celiac Scene is there as a part of a community to keep us all safe. Next. Okay, fast food. On my website, the fast food page is the most popular page. Sometimes I'll post on the CCA Facebook page about fast food, and people say, we can never go there, you can never trust it. Somehow that attention to that fast food page on my website is proof that yes, we would like to dine out with our friends and family at a fast food restaurant. Our children are going to fast food restaurants. There's been an earthquake, and the only restaurant in town is still standing is a fast food restaurant. I've created a list of all of the restaurants who have made an online commitment to an allergy info, gluten-free menu, nutrition chart. It's a resource that tells you what they offer at a corporate level. And that you can find that at Gluten-Free Fast Food Canada, Fast Food United States. It's very helpful, it's very popular, it's not healthy perhaps, and you are at the mercy of the young people who prepare your meals. It's meant to be a guide, but not a guarantee of a meal. You still have to ask all of those same questions. But if you want to be a part of the land of the living and people who live in our culture, I'm happy to offer that information to you. Next. I wanted to thank the Canadian Celiac Association for hosting this webinar. They are doing a great job. I can't believe I have to believe how much they've grown and stepped up to support all of the celiac community and the gluten-free community. And I want to thank my friend Cindy Little. She's a volunteer with the CCA chapter in Calgary, a blogger at her Everyday Gluten-Free Gourmet website, amazing gluten-free recipes. She helped me to create this PowerPoint, and I'm so grateful to her. And next. Just a small commercial for the Celiac Scene. It's a resource for living gluten-free in Victoria, Vancouver Island, and the Gulf Islands. It's owned and operated by celiacs. We guide you to restaurants we love, the products that are made locally. We've got an events page so we can direct you to farmers markets where there are trusted gluten-free manufacturers. They're selling their wares. Even food trucks, events, we are there. We want to help you live your life and enjoy it. And of course, we love visitors, so please use the website to navigate. And you can always email me at Ellen@the and I'm happy to answer your every question. After the podcast, I understand that there'll be, Melissa will be providing a PDF with all of the questions that I've asked and some links to the good pages on my website. And I think at this point, we're going to open it up to your questions.
Well, great. First, sorry. Thanks very much, Ellen, for all that great information. Sorry, everyone, for my voice. I just want to let, I checked on that kind of griddle situation with our gluten-free food program, folks, and they indicated that it's best that a restaurant have a dedicated or have a barrier separating the gluten-free food, and that the gluten-free food should be cooked on a dedicated pan or tray over the grill, so to keep it super safe. So
yeah, I'm happy to hear that. It is troubling to hear that they believe the grill is completely free of gluten. I'm not sure it's good enough.
okay, so we'll have a look at the questions we've got rolling in here. And so someone mentioned they went to McDonald's the other day and said they put chicken in the fryer. Went to McDonald's the other day and they said they put chicken in the fryer when oil changed. How come, and how do we change this, as I thought that all McDonald's French fries in Canada were gluten-free? So
okay, I do understand that the fries in Canada are gluten-free, not so in the United States. For some reason, and that's why I have the two lists, Fast Food Canada, Fast Food USA, because they do different ingredient sourcing, things like that. My understanding is that the deep fryer for fries just does fries, but if you're going to do gluten chicken McNuggets, then that deep fryer is cross-contaminated, and I wouldn't partake of that. If that's if I understand the question correctly, I would use enjoy the fries from a Canadian McDonald's, but I'm not sure where the chicken comes in there.
well, certainly, I guess it's good to maybe even ask the manager,
Yes.
or I guess a call could be put always to McDonald's corporate office, I guess, too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
someone's got a question here just about celiac camps for kids. They've noticed that there's one in Calgary and there's a new one coming in Vancouver. It's great for teaching kids what to avoid, how to cook certain things. She's
Very
just
much.
wondering about any other camps that may be closer. She'd benefit their kids would benefit greatly. I know that that's something we've talked about at the CCA among the staff, along with the gluten-free food program. We do know that Tim Hortons camps, ironically, because you can't buy gluten-free items really in a Tim Hortons, but their camps will be GF verified now, but I think they're limited on what kids can attend those camps. So I think they have to be at risk, but certainly good food for thought on camps for kids, and then making them safe, because I guess, Ellen, camps are similar to restaurants, that if you send your child for an overnight camp, you'd want to empower them. As a parent, you'd want to do all those questions ahead of your child going to a camp.
Yeah, it's fortunately I'm the adult in my family who's been diagnosed. My children are adults, but I don't know that there's anything more stressful than having a celiac child and having to advocate for them at every turn. Camps are a wonderful experience for kids. Certainly there are a few popping up. I'm not that familiar with it because it's not my cohort really, but the Calgary chapter does one or is associated with one. Kelowna is doing the first one, and that's overseen by a registered dietitian, Selena DeVries, who is a celiac herself. So that one can absolutely be trusted. And there are day camps or events, but the Vancouver chapter is doing a little event for kids, and the one in Calgary, every other month they do one. But the one in Calgary doesn't serve any food at all. It's an experiential event just to get together with kids who are also celiacs or gluten-free, and the parents as well. They need support too.
And certainly local chapters, again, contact the local chapter and see what events they have where families come together. I know in Toronto, they have an annual kids' Christmas party, great opportunity for children and families to get together. So,
Nice.
Yeah. And you can always do a meetup as well. Through our Facebook group, you can always, try and do a meetup as well. So, so someone has a question here that they've been to some restaurants that say they have gluten-free options, but when asked how they are cooked where everything else is. So she wants to know, or they want to know, how to get them better educated.
Well, that's what the celiac certification program is for. Certainly, I work full-time educating restaurants, letting them know. I'm not sure that there are local authorities that teach that. The health board doesn't teach it per se. I can say that if a restaurant offers a gluten-free option, promotes it as such on the menu online, and you partake and become ill, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency will be happy to investigate on our behalf. So there is recourse if the restaurant is failing at delivering. Educating, it's tricky. We have benefited from the gluten-free awareness push. A lot of restaurants do mean well. I do believe that they are in the business of wanting to serve us, of being hospitable, but some of them are not aware, as we are, as celiacs and gluten-free people, how complicated it is. So it is challenging to educate them. And of course, if a person's become ill, it's emotional, it's hard to do. So hopefully there's a chapter who can do that on your behalf. You can let the CCA know, perhaps they can direct you. And certainly the Canadian Food Association, Inspection Association has a 1-800 number, and you can always call that and say, what can I do about this? Because the CFIA is not in the business of shutting down businesses, they're in the business of educating. So we can collaborate with them as well.
And certainly Ellen's handout that she'll have that we emailed to everyone after tomorrow after the webinar, that could be something you could always print out and have and offer that to the restaurant as well. So I mean, we all can take a role in educating. So
yeah, we are all ambassadors. And we have come a long way because of the work of individual diners, volunteers with the CCA to gently educate the restaurateurs.
Okay, so we've got another question here. It says, you're understandably hesitant to eat gluten-free bread from a regular bakery. What about food, let's say, well, you talked about in a pizza place where flour may be in the air. I think you sort of touched on that, but is there anything else?
Frankly, I'm very skeptical. If a bakery bakes with gluten and gluten-free, in my mind, they need to test the product post-production to prove to themselves and to diners that what they're doing works. So I'm extremely skeptical about being able to produce truly gluten-free baking in that context, to bake gluten-free crusts in the context of a gluten bakery. I love it when they outsource their gluten-free crusts. But the question I ask when a gluten bakery says they can do gluten-free, I ask them, have you tested it? And I frankly do not partake. I want to support dedicated bakeries who do all of the legwork to make it safe and who don't make the profit that a gluten bakery does. I will purchase from a dedicated gluten-free bakery if I can.
Okay. Someone with the earlier kind of McDonald's question indicated it was a McDonald's in Listowel, Ontario. What I'd suggest is that you email the CCA just so we don't um, miss this question. You can email us at info@celiac.ca, and perhaps we can follow up with McDonald's corporate, because if the Listowel, store isn't following protocol, they should know about it. And sometimes it's just a breakdown in protocol, right, Ellen?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's all about educating the newest employees over and over. They may not be communicating properly. They may be underestimating the abilities of the restaurant, but it is, again, as I said at the very beginning, it's about communicating. I need to ask the questions. I need to have informed answers. And it's in the mix there that things can go sideways. So yeah,
Yeah.
check with corporate.
Yeah, and then someone's just commented that some of the issues can be with, like, say, McDonald's and Walmart versus a corporate or independently owned, actual store McDonald's, which has more room, more space for a full operation versus and that's something, we could always put a notice out in one of our updates to the community. So, all right, and let's see here. Any suggestions? Oh, this is good one, about what you can buy or eat at airports.
Well, this is a happening topic because there's I think there's an initiative. I'm not that familiar with it, but at least in the Vancouver airport, they've invited some gluten-free people and celiacs to give them feedback. Yeah, airports are tough. A lot of airports now offer overpriced, cheese, egg type of things. BC Ferries is like that as well. Take what you can get. I do believe you can bring, other than liquids, you can bring in your own food. I like to own what I need to eat. I don't like to arrive anywhere and expect someone to feed me to the safety level that I need. Meals on planes, very difficult. And I had a beef with WestJet, and I will name them, that the only meals I could order were boxes with gluten and gluten-free snacks together. Well, why would I buy that? And again, the same questions that you're going to ask at the airport, like how was this meal prepared? How can I be sure? You got to own the disease. We have a disease that we have to be medically responsible for, and we can't really download the responsibility on restaurants, other people. We have to take the precautions ourselves.
Okay. Let's see here. Any recommendations on drinks and dining out?
I love to drink. Hard liquor, I think, is so far, although the flavored vodkas and those kinds of things are fine. Wine is fine
beer.
For the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was the rest of the question?
Oh, just drinks. So I think, some people think, I've heard, Corona, oh, maybe it's safe. Well, it's not.
Yeah.
But the Glutenberg type beers, the specific.
Yeah, Bard's beers that are made from gluten-free grains. There's a lot of controversy now about being able to properly test for gluten in an alcohol product. The gluten testing is mostly, if I may be speaking out of turn here, but mostly wheat-based and doesn't work as well with barley. Do the right thing for yourself. We have options. Order the beer that's made from grains that are gluten-free.
Okay, great. And CCA just weighed in on the new changing standards of beer to make sure that now that there's all these creative beers, that we're fighting for making sure that there's a ingredient label on beers, because they were exempt the last go around, and we think with all the great support, we'll actually get what the community needs for safety. So yeah. You've got a question from Vicky. She's saying, hi, she moved to Winnipeg, but seems to know you, Ellen.
I know Vicky. She taught the newly diagnosed for years.
Okay, so her question is, with all the talk about hormones and antibiotics being passed on in meat and chicken, does the grain they are being fed get passed on to us? Now, I think Canadian, I think animals and stuff, I think it's a little bit tighter controls, I think, than the US, but do you think you
Well,
could?
my scientific background, I was a medical microbiologist, is, you know, what they eat isn't present in the food that we make of them. So I think that's a misconception. I don't, if, you know, cows eat grass and wheat, that doesn't mean that it's going to be present in the meat that we enjoy as a result. Might be something to follow up on, but I don't think that's a problem.
All right. We got a question from Lynn. There's a new restaurant in her neighborhood. The owner chef is very interested in making her restaurant gluten-free. Who can she contact for directions? So certainly you can reach out to the Gluten-Free Food Program. You want to reach out to the CCA, and we link you in with the group. They're more than happy to let them know about the program. And I think, you know, I think a lot of restaurants don't realize how much they can do very well with gluten-free clientele. If they do it right, the community really will come out and support them and be a great boost to their business. We know a lot of those restaurants who've gone GF verified have done very well.
Certainly,
Positive.
yeah, it's easier to be 100% gluten-free. Then you don't have this this issue of preventing cross-contamination. But yeah, they can reach the CCA, the CCA's program, and I'm happy to send them some information about the gluten-free diet and the gluten-free cross-contamination guidelines, which was created by the Calgary chapter. And that gives them a little bit of a heads up, and, you know, is this an arena that you want to venture into? It's a lot of work, it's more expensive, your profit margins are lower, but it's most of the places who do a gluten-free restaurant, it's a labor of love.
Right. Well, and we've even seen on places in Toronto that have done the program and actually seen a 50% increase in business because people will now travel as a destination to that great place. So
yeah, oh yeah, they're nationally known.
Yeah, for sure. So Annabelle's asking, how do you feel about disclaimers on GF menus? Example, if they say meals are gluten-free, but then say may contain traces of gluten.
Well, I think you should know the answer from that already. If they're going to tell me that a meal is gluten-free, if they use those words, those words are actually defined by Health Canada to mean safe for celiacs, less than 20 parts per million. If they're telling me that their meal is gluten-free and they share a deep fryer, that may contain traces, it's not a gluten-free menu. And I take issue with that, and I do contact the local office of the CFIA, because to be candid, and I know I'm speaking within my community, there may be restaurateurs listening here, but if you're going to say gluten-free, you're attracting me to your restaurant. You are inviting me to trust in your meal. But then when you tell me when I'm there, it isn't safe, there's an issue. And personally, I wouldn't trust that. It offends me that they would, can you imagine offering a peanut-free menu, but there may be traces of peanuts? It doesn't wash. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have our patronage, accept our payment, and yet give us a meal that isn't what you are representing.
Oh, there you go. As you say, you gotta have that backbone and be confident. Actually, someone said in Toronto, the airport allows people with your celiac to have their own food in their carry-on, especially if they have a doctor's note. So
excellent. And I've heard that with sports arenas and stadiums. Often they want their concession stand to make money. But I have my CCA card that says I'm a member. I don't have a diagnosis card, but I assert that I'm a celiac, and you know, I challenge them, what could I eat if I were needing to eat? And so I think at that point they're pretty open.
And CCA does have some restaurant cards that you can buy for a 10-pack. If you're a member, you get a complimentary card or a deck or a set of cards in your membership kit. But basically, you can hand out to restaurants, and that kind of flags them. Oh, this is important, you know, and it
Yeah.
gives them some guidance. So
In that sense, we're all ambassadors. We are
yeah,
all pushing the boundaries, educating people, and I mean, I'm very strident and direct in this webinar, but working with the restaurants actually educates them and helps them to do a better job for us, and that's what we ultimately want.
all right. I know Lita's got a question about traveling. I think that might be a whole webinar into itself. And I know
Yeah.
that Mark Johnson was one of our great ambassadors who did a whole webinar on travel. So I think probably, you know, some of the same rules apply. There's some, what I've understand is there's a lot of European countries who do it very, very well. And
Mhm.
I think North America is a little bit behind. So
And you can go online. You can Google translation cards for celiac disease. I can't off the top of my head remember one, but there is one in particular that's excellent, has translated it in many ways. And you can certainly offer that and look ahead online, look up Gluten-free Ireland, Gluten-free Scotland, see what those associations are recommending. There's a lot of legwork that we can do online, but I commend anybody who ventures out to another country with these challenges. Bring your snack bars.
exactly. We got two questions, sort of again about the distilled alcohol. So, from my understanding, the distilled alcohols are safe because it breaks down, you know, even if it's wheat based. Is that correct?
Yeah, it separates. So it's a physiological, biological process where the alcohol is lifted away from the protein that it's manufactured from. So it's a distillation process and it should be safe. That said, if they actually add flavorings to the alcohol afterwards, we need to be concerned. But generally, hard liquor is A-okay.
All right. And someone's asking if we've joined forces with big chains for the gluten-free food program. Just to clarify, the gluten-free food program is a independently run group that has partnered with the CCA, where we've provided the education resources for the restaurants. And I know they are actively always working on a number of places. And actually, I've got an update on our website because they have a brand new gluten-free finder. So a GF finder
Mhm.
that makes it easier for you to find the new restaurants that are opening up. So the
Mhm.
program is only a year old, but they've quickly coming, you know, along. And what we would encourage you to do, and I know Ellen's great about doing it, if you found a restaurant that's doing it right, you know,
Mhm.
recommend the program because if they're GF verified or GF dedicated, they'll get that extra advertising through the
Sure.
community, and you
And
know,
that means a
talking
lot
about
to.
rewarding, right? You're rewarding through patronage, right?
Yeah, that means a lot to the gluten-free consumer, and we need to support them. I'm also able to see some of the questions, and I see one here that says, if restaurants say gluten-friendly or gluten-aware, can we trust that? My understanding with the CFIA is if there's any of those terms are basically representing food as safe for celiacs. So they're trying to have it both ways. It's a bit of a dodge. They're probably covering their derrieres with that statement. But if they say gluten friendly, they're inviting me into the restaurant, and then I need to ask those questions. And if they can't answer my questions to my satisfaction, it's misrepresentation, and the CFIA will support us on that.
Great. Well, I know we're hitting 10 o'clock here, and we still have questions. I knew we were going to run out of time. So I'm just going to thank um, I'm going to thank Ellen for her commitment to offering this night of education. I know it's you know, it's a big undertaking, and I know this is something new. So I appreciate you having the courage to, you know, go with the technology and deliver this great evening. I think, you know, you'll be seeing over the last 2 years, we've been trying to bring more education online to make it more accessible to everyone across Canada. You know, we offer different nights and different times. to be cognizant of the time zones. And so thank you to those who are left on the call. And don't forget to fill out your survey and make sure you know how Ellen did, how we did, and just to let us know about some future questions. Lots of questions. I'm sure we'll probably have to run the topic again with you, Ellen, because there'll always be just more ways we can do the restaurant scene better every time.
Well, thank you so much. I commend the work of the CCA. I've been a member since I was diagnosed, from the minute I was diagnosed, and I want to recommend to everyone to support this organization.
Well, thanks a lot. So I wish everybody a wonderful evening, and looking forward to everyone's support during Celiac Awareness Month. And thanks everyone, and we'll sign off for the night. Thanks,
Okay,
Ellen.
bye for now.
Bye.